And hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of All About the Birds Fantasy and Gambling Show. I'm trying to share this out here, get it out on all the pages possible right now. But welcome. I'm Phil Stifle, as always, your host, joined by my two experts. We got Jason Sullivan, Josh Gamble, the two best in the business. If only I listened to them on a weekly basis, I might not lose as much money as I am on a daily basis. But that's another whole topic right there. So guys, how you doing today?
Good, man.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm ready to win this week. I'm ready to listen and pay attention. And I hope everybody else is.
You know what you shouldn't have listened to last week? Derek Carr.
We should not have listened to you last week on Derek Carr. You're supposed to pay attention to the weather when you're making your predictions.
I didn't know it was going to be a windstorm.
Did not do that. That really crushed all of our hopes last week because I'm pretty sure I stacked. I did the exact stack that you said to a T, and yeah, it did not work well. And then I went with all of Josh always says don't bet the under. Life's too short. Go with the over. He said go under on Pittsburgh. What was the final score of that game? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was a really, really high scoring game.
Yeah, they scored a lot of points.
Yeah, that's all you got to say there. All right. So let's dive in. Let's get started right away. If you got questions, comments, start them, send them questions, daily fantasy questions. If you want to know about a parlay you're thinking about, drop in the comment section. We'll answer it live. But as we start every show, Jason, what is your number one stack of the week?
So there's a few options I had this week. I've actually had a little bit of trouble narrowing them down. But my number one option right now, I think, is going to be the Seattle game against Buffalo at Buffalo with an implied game total of 51 points. I'm going to start it with Russell Wilson. I feel like, especially in cash, you can't go wrong with Russell Wilson. 25 points in every game except one. And in that game, he had 24.9. It's pretty solid. You're going to get, you're paying up. I think he's 7,600 this week. So you're paying up for that, but it's worth it. He's going to get you 25 points a week with a possibility of booming. I'm going to come back with, instead of DK Metcalf, it just seems like they kind of rotate a little bit on who is going to go off. I'm going to go with the cheaper Tyler Lockett this week. He is still averaging 9 targets a week. So I really like him this week in a game that could be a shootout. I'm going to come back with Stephon Diggs. He really has been pretty consistent too. He's averaging almost 10 targets per game and has scored at least 10 points in every single game this year. So he's got a really high floor, and I think there's a possibility that he has a really high ceiling too. So obviously Seattle can't stop anyone. So I like both sides of that game.
So how do you when you're sitting there and trying to do it? Because I have Tyler Lockett. I made that trade in my season long, and it seems like every week they're going back and forth on who is the top target of Russell Wilson. How can you really decide which one to go with? Because they're both great receivers, but you're not going to take them both. Like, what are you thinking when you're taking Lockett this week? Is it just because of the every other week thing, or is there something else you're thinking of?
No, not necessarily. It's funny. Last year, like kind of what you were saying right there, is that Lockett was always good at home and Metcalf was always the target on the road. This year, It's just completely toss up. This sounds like a cop out, but I go with the lower owned option every single week. I think both of them are equal in that passing game. Both could go off in any week. We saw Lockett go over 50 a couple weeks ago, and then we saw Metcalf put up 40 last week. So I just go with the lower option and hope that that's the boom play. I know that's the easy way out, but
yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough. I loved it a couple weeks ago when Lockett went off, and then last week it was nothing. It's frustrating. But I like that game. What other one are you debating between with that Seattle Buffalo game?
So there's actually two that I was kind of debating on my second favorite stack. I like the first one is going to be the Chargers against Las Vegas. Game total 52.5. I like Justin Herbert. What's not to like about Justin Herbert? He had a quote unquote off game last week and still put up, I think it was like 24 fantasy points. I'm going to come back with Keenan Allen. He's just getting so many targets every single game. 7,000. They finally bumped his price up to 7,000, which is probably still too low where it should be. But I like that. I might go with a skinny stack in that game and just go with just those two. I'm kind of debating. If I were to bring it back, I think I would go with Josh Jacobs. 31 carries last week. He didn't produce. I think he had 15.9 points. So he didn't overly produce, but anytime the running back's getting 31 touches in a game, it's hard not to like that.
Okay. And what was the other one then you were looking at?
The other one is even more low-owned, and that is going to be stacking Matt Ryan with Julio Jones. I think that game has a possibility of going way under-owned this week, and Julio especially has a possibility of going way under-owned. If you're not going to play that stack, you're probably not going to be able to fit Julio in your lineup. So I really like that stack in a game where Calvin Ridley's probably not going to play. So I think Julio's going to have a monster game, and obviously Matt Ryan's going to key in on Julio. So I like Hayden Hurst as well in that game too.
Okay. We talked about it last week. One of the things I always look at is the weakest defenses in fantasy ranking wise. And I pulled up the 3 lowest ranked DraftKings defenses this week. Do any of these games present any value? The 3 lowest defenses: Dallas going up against Pittsburgh, the Panthers going up against KC, and your guys Detroit going up against Minnesota, who Minnesota's been atrocious all year, but obviously they beat Green Bay last week. So it just goes to show, as I've said a million times on a bunch of shows, the NFC in general is so wide open and so confusing for just picking games, whether it's gambling, fantasy, or just your favorite team. Anybody could do it.
You know what? I feel like it's hard to not like who's ever playing against Dallas every single week. They can't stop anyone. So I feel like they're probably gonna put up a lot of points. Pittsburgh is early, so I would go with James Conner in that one. I think he's a really good play this week. Seems like they're gonna run the ball a lot, and it's hard to figure out those receivers on Pittsburgh. So I don't really play him as much, just because it seems like that's kind of another toss-up situation.
Everybody jumped on the Chase Claypool, and then he went pretty much scoreless for a week after that.
Right, and then if Johnson plays, he blows up, but he gets hurt every game he pretty much plays.
We got Johnny asking about a Brady Kamara AB stack. I don't know if you can touch AB on the first week, can you? Although his first week with New England last year, he went for 6 for 68 and a touchdown or something like that.
You know what? I like AB. I just don't know if I like him this week. Again, I feel like it's going to take a little bit of time. They said that, I think Arian said something about like, oh, you could play 15% of the game or 15% of the snaps all the way up to possibly 65. So I don't think we know enough at this point yet to play him. But you're right. Brady's going to look for him when he's in the lineup. So
absolutely. I've been clamoring outside of fantasy for the Eagles since August or July for the Eagles to bring Antonio Brown in, because we know our wide receivers stink, and the guy's a train wreck of a person. But you know what? He's one of the best wide receivers in football when he's mentally, mentally there and stuff like that.
He's got to be in a situation, though, I think, where he has somebody like Brady that's like a veteran presence that can kind of rein him in a little bit. That's what I would worry about in Philadelphia, is that he would be a bad influence in the locker room. And I don't know if Wentz has the personality to kind of combat that.
All right, so we'll skip over the Panthers Kansas City one out of the low ranked, but we're gonna talk about the Detroit Minnesota for a second. First off, Detroit kills me every week. And no matter which way I go, whether I'm betting for them or picking for them or going against them, it kills me every week. It doesn't matter. Funny. Basically, whatever I do, it's the complete opposite for Detroit and all.
Yeah. It's funny, they kill you in real life too. If you're a Lions fan, I know Josh can speak for it too. It's like every time you get excited, even a little bit, they just kill you.
Yeah. So I'm not considering stacking Detroit or even really Minnesota, that matter. I know there's rumors whether Matt Stafford may play or may not play. He may play with no practice. I don't know if you guys got the lowdown on that or not. Do you guys? What are they saying in Detroit about Matt Stafford this week?
Sounds like it's going to be a true game time decision, is what I've heard today. I think you have to have 5 negative tests in a row, so that leads them right up to Sunday. So we'll definitely see on that.
Yes,
and chiming in.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this. I mean, if he gets his 5 negative tests in a row, I don't care if he practices or not. They're going to play him.
Absolutely. I saw the name on the backup, but I forget now. It's Chase Daniel.
Chase Daniel. Yep.
Yeah.
One of those extremely wealthy backup quarterbacks that are in the NFL.
Yeah, $4 million a year to sit on the bench. Sign me up for that.
I don't know why Josh McCown, our practice squad quarterback, did you guys see he got signed by Texas?
Yeah.
Or the Houston Texans? It's like the dude's getting paid $200,000 to sit at home and coach high school football, but decided to go join the locker room in Houston. I don't know. It wasn't a smart decision. But anyway,
it's all about that character, man. I don't like the Lions at all this week, though. Kenny Galladay probably going to sit out. They say that he has, I think, a hip injury. Yeah. But word around the campfire is that it's not a hip injury. It's I hate my team. I hate my coach.
It's a game that they're trying to lose. They're trying to lose, what you're saying.
Pretty much. You know what I do like on the other side of that? I would never stack Kirk Cousins with anyone ever, but I do like Justin Jefferson. I think Thielen's going to get a lot of ownership. Cook is not going to get, he's going to get a ton of ownership too. He's probably going to be about 30%.
I was going to ask you about that because I know you're not a gambler. I mean, that's really, Josh's department, but I'm going to put last week, Dalvin Cook scored 51.6 fantasy points, over under 50 fantasy points against Detroit's defense. We got, I don't know. I mean, when he's healthy, he's one of the best.
I mean, he's gonna definitely go under that. I don't know if he can do that again, but
what's he gonna put up against? Detroit's run defense isn't the greatest. It's not the worst, but it's not great.
150 and 2 scores.
Okay, That's just under his 220 that he scored all-purpose and 4 scores. So that's still
100.
I was going to say, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, 150 all-purpose. I think he could maybe even go a little bit higher than that. I think he's good for 100 yards rushing, and I think he's good for a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, so that always have like a 30% ownership, doesn't it?
If he smashes again, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think he's a cash play. I'm going to start playing cash like you were talking about the other day. I'm going to start playing some cash this week. I think he's a definite must-own in cash. He's probably going to be 60% owned in cash, but I think you have to play him in cash. As far as GPPs go, I don't know if I would play him in GPPs. I think the probability of him getting in the 20s is good, but if he scores you 22, 23 points at 30% ownership, it's not really going to help you all that much. I like to go, especially at the top of the running backs, I like to go with the lower-owned options. Because it seems like, him, Derrick Henry, Kamara, any of those guys can go off any given week. And if you have the low-owned guy, you're going to be sitting pretty.
And to speak of what you said about the cash, we talked off the air last week. So I've been struggling. I've told everybody I've been struggling. So I went a different route last week, and I didn't win big, but I doubled my money last week because I went the cash route. I went to the double-up events where you're not trying to finish in the top 15, 20% just to cash. All you got to do is, finish in the top 46, 47%, and you're making money. You're never going to get that big payday, but, and it's something that people often forget about because they see those big first-place prizes, which most people don't have a shot at, but yet they kind of ignore that, and it's something that more people need to think about.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. I told Josh a stat the other day that 90% of the money on DraftKings and GPPs is won by the top 1% of players on DraftKings. So really, your chance of winning one of those, yeah, it looks great, and you see 50K or 500K or whatever, you're not going to win those realistically. And only the top, few percent are going to win anything, like huge money like that. So GPPs, double ups, especially single entry double ups, definitely smart.
Yeah, it's definitely that's with how much I've lost this year, weeks in a row. I did it. I did 2 last week. I won both of them. That's all I'm doing this week. I'm just doing straight double up events this week, hoping to get back in the winning ways. I had all 1 o'clock guys in the one game one double up last week, which it's awful to have all 1 o'clock games. And I was actually in the top 20 or 25 places at the start. And then as the 4 o'clock games, it just kept going down and down and down. But still, even with no 4 o'clock games, and even with Seattle playing and all these high scoring fantasy offenses playing in the 4 o'clock games, I was still able to hold on, still able to double up. And now my bank account's a little bit flusher than it was.
You know what they say too? They say even the top end guys on DraftKings play 60 to 70% double ups, and then or cash games, and then play 30 to 40% GPPs. That's a good way to build the bankroll for sure. Definitely.
So I got one other random one. I don't know why. I saw this one when I was doing my research on the gambling end, and I kind of just thought about it for a second. And I know it's stupid, and I know it's an awful idea to play, but the Jacksonville-Houston game, no Gardner Minshew. They're going with Jake Luton, some random dude. I have no idea. I know more about Ben than I do Jake Luton.
Yeah.
But
never even heard of him.
Houston pass defense is atrocious. They've given up 300 or more yards 3 or 4 weeks out of the last 5. When Jacksonville played him a couple weeks ago, I know it was Gardner Minshew, but they gave up 357 yards. Is there any reason to play any of the wide receivers or even Jake Luton as a really cheap stream, in a daily fantasy lineup?
You know what? I thought about that game too. It seems like you'd be able to find some value in that. Oregon State. There you go. Didn't even know that.
Johnny knows his college. He does all the draft research and stuff.
I think the only guy I would play in that game, honestly, for Jacksonville is going to be Robinson. I know his price is pretty high, and he's been kind of letting us down a little bit lately, but I think that's a smash spot. Houston can't stop the run or the pass, so I think I would sit on the run in that game if I was building a lineup.
Actually, this is not even in my notes, but you mentioned Robinson disappointing. What to make of the Colts running back situation? Because obviously there's been some issues there as well. Was it the Colts? It's the Colts I'm thinking of, right?
The Colts, yeah.
Yeah. Where somebody went off last week. Not the guy I had, but
Yeah, Naheem Hines, yeah. Well, they said Taylor's hurt, right? So he's definitely not 100%, so he's not worth playing, I don't think.
But he was active for the game. He just didn't do much last week.
Well, and it's funny because you can't really play Hines either because he's had 2 huge games and the rest have been under 8 points or something. So It's not like you can sit on that either. So I would stay away from that game or that team.
Okay, just a thought. I mean, it's just tough because everybody, especially in season-long fantasy, everybody drafted Taylor, and you always draft handcuffs, and it just hasn't worked out this year consistently.
I think me and Josh actually both have him on our fantasy teams.
I have Jonathan Taylor too, so it's not ideal.
No.
Yeah, Johnny's got Pascal. I don't even know why he's on your team. You should just drop him at this point. He's not really.
I actually like Pascal this week though as a low.
Okay, never mind. Don't drop him, Johnny.
Just in daily, just in GPPs, not for season long.
All right, so I'm going to end the fantasy segment with a question for you, and then that same question when he's done is going to turn into Josh to start the gambling segment. It's the same question: who has been, in your opinion, the biggest disappointment and the biggest surprise in daily or season-long fantasy this year? And then you could do the same thing gambling-wise. Which team has disappointed the most or surprised the most?
Well, I'll start with disappointments first. The biggest disappointment, honestly, has been injuries. I mean, there's so many high-owned guys or highly picked guys that have just been complete, nothing even. I mean, Michael Thomas comes to mind. Yeah, Michael Thomas too.
Oh, you were the guys that drafted him in the first round? Yeah, because
we were the guys that listened to my piece and my advice and drafted him third overall, and then this is where we are. He has 3 catches on the season. So, I would say that. I would say otherwise, my biggest disappointment, Lamar Jackson. He has really regressed. It seems like in real life and also in fantasy. I mean, he was a smash play last year in fantasy, even at 8,000 a game, and he's really not been very good this year. I would say biggest surprise is tough, but I'm gonna have to go with the rookie quarterbacks. I would say Burrow and especially Justin Herbert. I mean, Herbert, we didn't even know he was going to play. And he's arguably in daily fantasy one of my 3 or 4 favorite plays every week. So I would say he would definitely be the biggest.
I mean, the Chargers don't win. They blow fourth quarter leads nonstop. But fantasy-wise, he's putting up the points. And
I mean, even when he has a bad week, he's putting up in the 20s. I think he had a bad week last week, like I said, 24 points. I mean, and he keys on Keenan Allen. I think it's like 38% of the targets go to Keenan Allen. So what's not to like about that?
And on the Lamar Jackson thing, at the end of last season, I was making arguments with people like, I know the rule. You draft running back the first round. You draft running back most likely the second round. Me, I've always done running back first 3 rounds in every season-long draft. That's always where I've put my draft capital. But I was trying to make an argument because of how great Lamar Jackson was that he could potentially have been a top 12 or 14 pick this year. And then as I let it marinate over the summer and all, I'm like, no. He's going to regress and all. But, yeah, it's really surprising how bad he has fallen, at least fantasy-wise, and on the field too.
Well, yeah. I mean, you cut it last year on his running. That was the thing. He was putting up 90, 100 yards every single game, and he's not doing that. Honestly, Kyler Murray has been pretty much what Lamar Jackson was last year. This year, it seems like he's been really good with running. Especially, I mean, a quarterback that gets 10, 12 rushing attempts per game, that's a lot to like in fantasy.
All right, so how about on the gambling end? Let's transition to gambling. Has a team, their results, not necessarily your results betting on the team, has a team stood out that has surprised you on the bad side and the positive side a lot this year?
Yeah, so I'll start on the bad side like he did, just because I know you are going to love this. But the biggest disappointment gambling-wise have been the Dallas Cowboys. They went into the season, they were kind of the trendy chic pick for, to win the Super Bowl and, all this stuff. And, not even counting the last, couple weeks or so since Dak went down, but even before Dak went down, they weren't covering spreads. They're 0-8 right now against the spread. 0-8. I mean, that's historic, honestly. There was a lot of people that were riding the Cowboys each week with their bets. And
even before Dak went down. I mean, it's not like they're 0-4 since Dak went down or whatever. Right. It's 0-8 on the season. I mean, that's with That's with a full complement of healthy guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at what now, 2.5 weeks, we'll call it, I think, without Dak. Absolutely. We'll not count the half week. I mean, you're 0-6 against the spread with your superstar quarterback, and you're putting up 1 million points a game, but you're giving up 1 million points a game. So they would definitely be my number one disappointment this season.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. Absolutely. And who would be your biggest surprise or pleasant surprise of the season?
Yeah, and so I'm going to cheat a little bit on the surprises. So I'm going to give you 3, actually.
Okay.
Just because
Not one,
I couldn't.
not 2.
No.
I'm going to give you
3.
11 of my favorites.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you.
17 of the 18 teams are my surprise this year.
I'm going to give you 3 just because I couldn't choose one between the 3 of them. So I'm going to start with who I would have picked if you made me pick one, and that would be the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
The Cincinnati Bengals, I mean, they're not good at winning football games, obviously, but they're 6-2 against the spread this year. So they're keeping games close. They're putting up a ton of points. I don't think anybody expected this out of them to begin the season. I don't think they expected Joe Burrow to be as good this quickly as he has been. So they would definitely be my number 1 surprise. I've also been very surprised with the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 5-2 against the spread. People were, expecting them to be very, very bad. And right now, I mean, they're I guess you could call them, based on their record, a playoff contender at the moment. So they would be my number 2. And then my number 3 would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think people expected the Steelers to be, an above average team. But I don't think they expected them to be undefeated. They're 6-2 against the spread.
Let me interrupt you there for that. I don't know if you guys watched last night. Just watch a few seconds of this clip right here. I'm not buying the Steelers hype either this year. So I don't have to play the rest of it. I don't have to play the rest of that clip. That's the whole clip that you needed to see right there. That was from our season preview show beginning of the year.
Listen, they're only the most complete team in the league, okay? But besides that,
hey, they are the 21st ranked. Hold on, I had notes on them last night because I wanted to back my up there. I gotta find it. Hold on, they're 25th yards per game, 25th yards per play. I don't know. That was just a bad preseason prediction on my part.
Yeah, and I mean, it's to the point now where gambling wise, you kind of have to buy into what they're doing out on the field. I mean, you're looking at half a season right now. So they're the type of team that you gotta kind of roll with. At this point, as Jay just alluded to, they're probably the most complete team on both sides of the ball so far this season. So it's and that's incredibly surprising.
Yeah, it surprised me. Like, I really did not buy into the Steelers this year.
No,
Ben Roethlisberger coming back from that injury,
right.
And at his age, what's he, 38 years old? James Conner and Juju Smith have not stayed healthy over the last 2 years.
Right.
I knew they'd have a great defense, but I think they were the last ranked offense in the league last year, and
right.
you just don't come back from that. And I mean, they're just putting up points every single week. And, that leads into your first bet of the week, which you've got 2 units on. And you're back going over, not going unders, but here we go. So your first bet of the week is?
Yeah, so, and, that was a nice segue.
I'm trying to work on these segues here, trying to lead one into the other,
And before I get into that, I just want to apologize to all the listeners for not only taking the Jets, but also taking anything under. I can promise you that won't ever happen again. I tried to do something different and it didn't work. But this week, this is actually, for me, this is actually a 6-unit week, just because there were 4 games that I really liked. There were 2 games that I liked more than the rest of them. So I've actually got 2 units on the Steelers, minus 14 against the Cowboys. Cowboys don't even know who they're starting at quarterback. It's either Garrett Gilbert or the pride of Central Michigan Chippewas, Cooper Rush. Fire up chips.
Yeah.
So it's I just don't see the Cowboys really being able to score much. Like if you told me the final score was 38-6, I'd be like, yeah, it sounds about right. Like, it's just I just don't see how the Steelers can't cover the 14 points. I just don't.
So a question on that game, because when I did we do our Eureka locks every week on the preview show on the Wednesday night show, and the Steelers were 13.5 at the beginning of the day yesterday when I did my research. They've gone to 14. With that game? Obviously, the Steelers are 6-1 against the spread, I believe it is. The Cowboys are atrocious. All that. What's the cutoff for you on that line for people? If they're just not, they haven't made that bet yet. How high will you let it go before you say no? That's not a good line to bet anymore.
16.5.
Okay.
I know that sounds like a massive number, but I just think that the Cowboys are just that bad. I mean, their defense might be the worst in the league. Them and Atlanta, teams like that. Once you start getting up into like 17 points, and you're getting past the 2-score mark, I think is when you start getting into more dangerous territory. I don't think it will get that high. I could definitely see it getting up to maybe 14.5, 15 by Sunday. But I don't see it getting that high. I think it's going to hover around 14.5 for the rest of the week.
I think that's talking about. I think Johnny's emoji there is based off for the Cowboys. He's just calling them that. I think that's all that is. Yeah. No, I love that game too, because I always try to write down my games and then see how many of them are close to yours. And that was the first game I wrote down too.
Yeah.
So it definitely stuck out at me big time.
Yeah,
so.
And it's one of those things right now that honestly anybody that's betting against the Steelers at this point in time is foolish, to be honest with you. You have to take them every week until they prove that you shouldn't.
So you got another 2-unit bet.
Yeah, 2-unit bet. So I like the Seahawks -3 going into Buffalo. Buffalo has not looked good. They have struggled. I would say, they got blown out by the Titans. They started off the season so hot, and you're looking at, could this team compete for an AFC championship? Just all of a sudden they just kind of fell off. And I think that the Seahawks are the best team in the NFC. I know that their defense is really not good. I mean, it's downright bad.
It's not as bad as people, I think, say. It's just nowhere near what people are used to seeing out of Pete Carroll's defense. So,
right. What's funny about this?
Don't get me wrong, but they're not, you'll never see them in the bottom 3, ranked defenses on DraftKings or something like that.
Right.
What's funny too about the Seahawks is that everybody always says, Russ has to be awesome for them to be good. Well, he's awesome pretty much every game. So,
right, exactly. And to be honest with you, and this isn't going out on a limb or anything like that, but right now he would be my pick to win the MVP in the NFC. And I do think that he is the best quarterback in the NFC. He's just such a dynamic player, and when he's one of those guys, when he has a bad week, you're like almost like shocked by it, like what happened. And one more note about this game. So this is going to maybe sound kind of weird, but this game to me screams like a trap to take the Seahawks. And I think that it screams like such a trap to take the Seahawks that it's almost like telling you to take the Seahawks. Like, if that makes sense. It's almost like the odds makers are making it look like a trap, so that way you take the Bills instead of the Seahawks. And that's just there's no evidence, no numbers, no nothing. That's just a gut feeling that I have about this line.
Okay. All right. You got 2 more plays.
Yeah, 2 more plays. So I'm taking 2 overs. 2 overs for you. 2 overs.
Not going under.
0 unders.
I'm looking at lines. Are there any lines we can take under? No, we don't want to take under ever again.
No. No, life is too short for that. So, I like the over 52.5 in the Panthers Chiefs game. The Chiefs are going to score their points. We all know that. I do like the Panthers to be able to score in that game as well. So that's really the key to hitting that. And I haven't seen the latest, but I think that there's a potential for McCaffrey to come back. Even if he doesn't, I still like that offense to score enough points for that game to hit the over.
If Kansas City scores their normal 30 to 35 points, it only leaves 20, 25 points at the pan, and they could score that even without McCaffrey.
Absolutely. So it's one of those classic games where it's like, one team, like they're going to get theirs. Is the other team good enough to put up enough points to hit that over? And I think that the Panthers are a good enough team to do that. So. And then the next over that I have is 47.5 in the Ravens Colts game. And it might be surprising to some people just because both of them have, way above average defenses. And their offenses are, they're not great offenses. But just that number is just too low for me. I think that number should be higher, and I'm going to exploit the number when I think that it's too low. The break-even point on that is 24 points for each team. I think that 24 points for each team is very, very doable.
That's what the Ravens put up against the great Steelers defense last week, right? Was it 20? Right. 25, I think it was 24 points. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're seeing a trend this year where even when you have these teams like last week when the Steelers and the Ravens played each other, two teams that have good defenses, it's the eternal question: who wins, the good offense versus the good defense, or it's just, and it just seems like every week the offense is winning those battles, and I just, I made some poor decisions last week on the unders. Just my advice going forward is like, you got to hammer these overs until the games tell you to stop doing it. Right now, they're just not telling you to stop doing it.
All right. So a question on a game that I had marked. There's one game I had marked that you didn't mention there, because I did like most of those games there. I had the Chiefs game written down, and I had the Pittsburgh game and the Seahawks game. But the other game I wrote down, and I'm surprised, basically, you gave a stat, the Dolphins are 5-2 against the spread. They're going up against the Cards. When I wrote this down on FanDuel, it was 3.5 points. The Dolphins were plus 3.5. The over-under was only 48.5. I just really thought I liked that Cards line. Minus 3.5 against the Dolphins. I know they won last week, but Tua looked awful. He's going East Coast to West Coast. Yep. The Dolphins defense played really well last week, obviously put up a lot of fantasy points, but I don't know. I thought that 3.5 point Cards line just jumped out at me as one that I should bet on. But then I also thought maybe that line's too low. Maybe that's another one of those trap moments there.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, the public agrees with you, because the last I'm looking right now is that spread actually got pushed out to 4.5. Okay. So there's a lot of money coming in on the Cardinals, and rightfully so. My only reason for staying away from that game is just because I want to see at least one more game where Tua plays quarterback. It's so hard for me to judge a guy based on 1 week, you've got the jitters, and, you've got all these other things going on. He hasn't played football in how long now, after having, that devastating injury. And, so it's one of those games where, like, push come to shove, I definitely like the Cardinals in that game. It's just for me to put my money on the line. I want to see Tua play one more game before I make any type of decision on what I want to do with Miami.
Okay. All right. It's a fair point. It's just, it was really that East Coast. It kills the Eagles all the time, no matter how veteran or how good they are. That East Coast to West Coast, it always. The West Coast to East, it's the same way and all. It just jumped out at me, but it makes sense. I just thought the line was too low. If the line had started out at 5.5 or 6.5, then it would have made more sense. But at 3.5, I was just like, something's not right there. So
no, and I agree with that. I do think that line started off a little bit too low at 3.5. Based off of what we saw from Tua last week, and the reason they won so handily last week was from defense and special teams touchdowns. And is that going to happen every week? Absolutely not. Like they won't have another game this season where they score. I think it was 2. I think it was a defensive touchdown and a special teams touchdown. They won't have another game this year where they do that.
They might go 2 or 3 years without having both happen in the same season, same game. So
exactly,
it's a very rare feat when a fantasy team goes off for that kind of. A defense goes off for that many fantasy points and stuff like that. So.
Exactly. And if somebody came to me right now and said, "Hey, man, I'm putting my money on the Cardinals this week," I'd be like, "Yeah, I like that pick." I just, me personally, I need to see more from Tua before I physically put my money down on that.
All right. So, we don't have an Eagles game to talk about the line for this week, obviously. So I'm going to throw it out to you guys. Detroit Lions. We're gonna talk about your Detroit Lions. 4.5-point dogs to the Vikings, who just smoked the Packers. Not really smoked, but it was a lot different of a game than we expected. Beat the Packers last week. It's a 4.5-point dogs. The Lions. 51 is the over. Detroit going to win this week?
So if Matt Stafford plays, and somebody's looking to have a little fun on that game, not doing a full unit, but just do a little bit of money. They're looking to have some fun.
A quarter of a unit.
Yeah. I would bet that plus 175 money line, honestly.
That Lions money line.
On the Lions money line. Absolutely. I don't think that the Vikings are any good, personally. I don't know what happened last week. I don't know what happened. But I think
51 fantasy points.
Exactly.
Well, I was going to say that and the win too. You couldn't really throw the ball in that game. So
right, exactly. And it's a type of situation too where you look at the line, you look at everything, and how much of that is influenced by the way that they played last week, and surprising everybody, or how indicative of it is, the type of team that they actually are. And the team that they actually are, to me, is not a very good football team. Don't get me wrong, the Lions are not a good football team either. But a plus,
the Eagles, and the Eagles are in first place in their division. So
right. But a plus 175 money line, between two teams that I would consider not very good. I'm gonna throw a little dart at that real quick and hope I hit it.
I like it. It's a good piece of advice there if you want to have a little fun,
Right.
Yeah. All right. So that's all I got. Do you guys have anything else? But I got a couple other off fantasy and gambling topics to address here with you guys. You got anything else to address?
No, that's it.
That's it. You got anything else, Josh?
No, I'm ready to take my beating now.
I was going to say I'm excited for this.
There's a big college football game last week against somebody's favorite Michigan Wolverines against someone else's favorite Spartans. What happened last week, guys? I thought we were so set on how that game was going to end. Wasn't it supposed to be like a 30-point blowout or something?
One word. Embarrassing. That was an embarrassing loss for Michigan because, Jay will agree with me. Michigan State this year is not a good football team. I don't think Michigan is a very good football team either. But to lose that game, it shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen.
2 observations. The first one, I believe the exact quote was, "I will be shocked if Michigan State scores a touchdown in this game." No, wait, disappointed.
I remember that, actually, yes.
Yeah. And the second, if your DBs cannot, in any level, cannot cover the receivers one-on-one, you may want to put safety help over the top.
And see, that's the thing. Don Brown, he just doesn't do that. You're on your own. You get lit up 40 yards down the field, or you get a pass interference penalty. It doesn't matter. You're on your own, man.
I'm actually feeling pretty good about Penn State against Michigan now. After that game, Penn State's got a chance now.
I'll tell you right now, the way to beat Michigan, and if Penn State is paying attention, this is what they will do. They will chuck the ball 40 yards down the field. It doesn't matter how good of a throw it was, because like a lot of these throws last week by Lombardi, I mean, like they were dying ducks going down there,
Right.
and the DBs
Floaters.
got beat because they're on an island down there,
Right.
and then they start grabbing, and that's Don Brown's defense.
It was pretty
grab
much
and
a
pray.
40-yard,
Grab and pray.
Pretty much a 40-yard completion or a holding trophy on all of them. So
every single one, grab and pray.
Yeah.
Grab and pray.
I really do have a Michigan question, and actually they didn't address Michigan State, so I'm thinking maybe Michigan State might be the same way. I'm not sure. I was watching PTI earlier today, and I very rarely watch that show, and they were talking Notre Dame, and they were talking how much Michigan hates Notre Dame. Is that really true? Because I never knew that, actually.
Yeah. So and Jay's not going to like that I'm saying this, but not even Notre Dame. So Michigan, in order of hatred, is Ohio State, Michigan State, and then Notre Dame. So, it's that I sent Jay a graphic actually about a month or so ago that showed teams that their biggest rival, their in-state rival was not their biggest rival. And that was one of them. Like, if Michigan State wins and it's not against Michigan, I'm not upset. I don't care. Like, if Ohio State beats anybody, I'm not happy about it. Okay. And I guess the same could be said about Notre Dame. Michigan hates Notre Dame.
Does Michigan State have the same feelings, or?
No, Michigan State hates Michigan the most, for sure. You also got to keep in mind, though, we haven't been competitive outside of the last 10 years or so. Over the last 50 years, we haven't been competitive with Michigan at all until recently.
Yeah,
there's like as a Philly guy, there's a lot of Irish fans in this area, and it was just always because back when I was a little kid, Notre Dame and Penn State played a lot, so we had a little hatred there, but it wasn't enough to ever really get excited. And years ago, when Notre Dame went on their run with who was the quarterback that got drafted by, I believe he was with the Packers for a little bit. They went like 8-0, 9-0, and then lost late in the season a couple of years ago.
Kaiser, right?
Yeah, Kaiser that season.
Kaiser.
And I was rooting for them, even though I'm supposed to not root for them and everything.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's no real true hatred in this area for Notre Dame, like in other parts of the country.
I feel like I hate Notre Dame. Michigan State doesn't like Notre Dame either. I feel like, I don't know, for some reason, just something about them. It's like they get that treatment. I think they're ranked 4th right now, and I've seen them play twice. They're not that good of a team.
No.
Like
they're never as good as the ranking says.
Well, and here's the thing with Notre Dame too is they're a team without a home. You know what I mean? They don't have a conference, and they play a lot of games against the Big Ten. Like they play a lot of games against the Big Ten for not actually being in the Big Ten. So a lot of Big Ten teams, especially in this area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, those states like Indiana, like they're really gonna hate Notre Dame.
Yeah. All right. I had to get that Notre Dame question off my chest. I really needed it addressed. I really wanted to know what happened last week to Michigan. So everybody,
Michigan sucks. That's what happened.
Michigan sucks. John Harbaugh gotta go. Probably
Harbaugh's gotta go. Gotta go.
Left on his deal, like 65 more years on his deal.
No, there's actually only one after this year.
It feels like there's 600 more years left on that deal.
Yeah, and I'll say this: if he loses to Indiana this week, he's gone
right away. Like at the end of the season, or right away.
Definitely at the end of the season.
Okay.
I think that they would
season firing in college as much as you do in the pros.
Right. And to be honest, so Michigan hasn't lost to Indiana maybe in 15 years, something like that. So, that would be like kind of the lowest of low right now for Michigan is if he would lose that game. Michigan's not the type of team to fire a coach in the middle of the season, especially a Michigan man, like Jim Harbaugh. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, enough of that.
You just lost half the viewers.
I'm throwing in the towel.
Notebook is closed on the episode. Real quick, before we sign off the air, before I thank everybody for joining us, you got to stay tuned because we're doing something special next week. on top of our fantasy show on Thursday night. I think did we agree on Tuesday night? I think we agreed on Tuesday night, right? Yeah, I haven't
Tuesday night's good.
Tuesday night, we're doing a second show next week. We are going to do a Masters show. All three of us are huge golf people. It's so weird to say the Masters is this upcoming week. It's
in November.
so awkward.
Yeah.
It's almost Thanksgiving, and we're going to have the Masters. And if all goes according to plan, we'll have 2 Masters tournaments in 5 months?
It's 5-6 months, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super.
I love it.
I was even watching today's tournament a little bit today, the first round, which I never watched the first round of mediocre, tiny, tournaments and all. I'm just so psyched for the Masters next week. So we're gonna do a Masters show, talk fantasy, talk gambling, just talk golf next week. Got a little something special in my attire for next week for you guys. Some fun stuff next week if everything works out according to plan. But everybody, make sure you tune in Tuesday night. I mean, I know there's like billions of Masters and golf fans out there. Make sure you're all tuned in and watching and all. I don't know if you guys watched today at all, but Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka both looked awful today. Yeah. I know they've been playing very little lately. They've been sick and injury stuff, but I did notice that today. But yeah, anyway, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your comments. Thank Last Out Media, Heat Ratio, the Athletes Hub. We're the All About the Birds Network. We got Jason Sullivan, Josh Gamble. Make sure you follow these guys. I'm sure if you tweet at them, they will answer your questions for fantasy or gambling. No problem at all. Check out their articles on aatbirds.com. Probably dropping tomorrow afternoon, if not Saturday morning, on all that stuff. Everybody, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here again. Hold on.
That's all right.
I'm going to close with me saying Pittsburgh sucks again. That video, but I'll hold that up again. I'll click end broadcast while that's up on the screen.
You know what the best part about this? Josh bought this for my kid. True story.